Welcome to the Carson Career Spring Series. I'm Parabota Mugan. I'm currently a senior majoring in human resource management at the Carson College of Business, and today I'll be facilitating today's events with Dr. Chip Hunter, Dr. Thomas Tripp, and Holly Mcdonough from Cintas Corporation. I'm really excited to get started with today's workshop and panel, How to Negotiate a Job Offer. As our attendees log in, we'd like to remind our participants of some helpful ground rules. First, please note that this event includes interactive workshop and panel that will run about 90 minutes. The panel portion of the event will be recorded. Please make sure your microphone is muted upon entry to prevent echoes during the presentation. Please consider turning on your video so we can see your beautiful smiles. There's a panel at the end, so raise your hand or use the chat box to ask any questions. WC students, please make sure to complete the survey at the end of the session. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And now I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our speakers for the workshop portion of this event. Please welcome Dr. Chip Hunter and Dr. Thomas Tripp. I'll let each of our speakers introduce themselves briefly before jumping into today's session.
Hello, Cougs, and thank you so much for having me. I am Holly Mcdonough, the Recruiting Strategy Manager for Centos Corporation. A little bit of background on me. I started my career 8 years ago in our management trainee program, recruited from Texas Tech University, started in our MT program in Dallas, Texas. I did counter offer when I got my offer back 8 years ago. It didn't go in my favor, but hey, 8 years later, here I am, and I've been in operations leadership roles, and then I now am in the talent acquisition space where I am a part of I run our campus recruitment program across the United States and Canada. I also oversee our management trainee program and intern programs. We have a bunch of great Washington State alum that are a part of our team. So I am excited to share with you some real life experiences from what everyone has been saying over the past 45 minutes. And so I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So I just want to inform all our panelists that you approximately have 2 minutes to answer each question. And it's going to be fun, and I'm really excited to hear your answers. The first question we have, I'm going to ask each and every one of you to respond. I'd really like to hear what you guys have to say. And our first question is, what should students know before entering a negotiation conversation with a potential employer? And we can start with, Tom, go ahead. Sorry about that.
So one of the things that you want to know before you go into any negotiation is, what are you going to do if you don't reach a deal? So if you think you may want to walk away, what happens when you walk away? What is your alternative to reaching an agreement with the party? And you always want to know that, because it drives a lot of other things. It, for example, will determine whether or not you should accept a deal, because you only want to accept deals that are better than whatever you're going to do if you don't reach a deal. So sometimes we go into negotiation, we think, boy, it's this or nothing. And it may not be. You always have other alternatives. You may not like them very much, but you have other alternatives and you want to know what they are.
I think that's terrific. And I'm going to save Holly for last so she can tell us how it really works while we theorize. But I think it is useful to the extent possible also to figure out what your counterpart will do if you don't reach a deal. Will they just go to the next person on the list? Are they desperate? Can you get any information on how valuable you are to your counterpart? Are you the person they really want? Now, keep in mind, if they have made you an offer, they've indicated you are the person they really want. So I think at that point, that is signaling there may be an opportunity to negotiate. But the second thing I will say is, you need to, I think where possible, do your homework and understand whether this is in fact a negotiable offer. And in some cases, particularly for new graduates, offers are not particularly negotiable. I don't want to say you're commodities, but if a firm like Holly's is hiring 100 of you, there's probably a fairly standard offer for a new college grad that goes out there. And you might ask, well, how would I ever find out? If I go ask Holly, what's negotiable, she's going to tell me, this is your offer, take it or leave it. But it might be. This is where Cougar Nation comes into play. Ask the Cougs who already work there. They'll do you a solid. Ask people who are in your network. Hey, I got this offer from this firm. I'm very excited. Pear says, hey, I've got an offer from Amazon. I wonder if this is negotiable. Can I get to anyone who could give me a little tip about whether, this is the way they do it, take it or leave it, which I think is very common, for example, for new public accountants. It's just like, this is your deal. I'm in a big firm. That's all you're going to get. Or is this something where I really should say, hey, I'm worth a little more, and may have a conversation? So I think building on Tom's point, know your own walk away, see if you can figure out what the other side's alternatives are, and then understand whether this is a situation that is indeed negotiable, would be some things I would look at.
Yeah, I love all that stuff. And I would also echo the, do your research, but does your experience grant negotiating? As Dr. Hunter mentioned, we are an organization that we hire 300 management trainees across the US and Canada, and we have to stay consistent across all of those opportunities that we have. So there isn't a ton of negotiation for our particular positions. However, there are some things that maybe you can ask for when you are talking through that final offer and that discussion. I would say, kind of on the flip side, really, I was taught this early on in my management trainee program, and then when I stepped into a sales representative role, I love to talk, and sometimes I talk myself out of what I wanted. So when you are presenting your counter offer, sometimes just stop talking and wait for the other person to say something. That was something that I learned really quickly, and my mentors to this day still tell me. So those would be probably the two things. Does your experience grant negotiating? And then one, sometimes you just stop talking. And that's actually negotiating for anything, personal, business, anything in your life too. That'd probably be my two tidbits.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I can completely relate to that, by the way. And now I'm going to introduce our next set of questions. So I will be giving you guys individually different questions. And I will start off with Dean Hunter. All right. So do I run the risk of losing the job offer if I attempt to negotiate for more?
Very rarely, in my experience, doing something ridiculous might be a little costly, but often the answer is no, that's ridiculous, but the offer still stands. It's really quite unusual to have somebody renege on an offer if you are respectful and behave ethically. I think, though, that what I would suggest is when you attempt to negotiate and you're a little bit concerned about this, a way to make both you and your counterpart feel better about it being appropriate to negotiate is to have some standards or a reference point that would give you a reason for asking for, say, more than they offer. You don't really have an opportunity to anchor as a job candidate, because typically an offer of employment comes with some terms, right? So the employer goes first and says, hey, we'd like you to come on board. Here's the set of terms. Can I counter? Well, out of the blue is a little weird. But if you say, for example, hey, I know that management information majors from the Carson College last year had starting offers of around 62, but you've only offered me 56. I think 62, because I'm a good management information systems major, is really the going rate for what an MIS person should get. What do you think? And if you do it that way, rather than say, I demand 62, I think the worst thing that can happen is your employer can come back, as Holly says, look, we hire a lot of people and this is the package. And I hope you'll still be excited and coming on board. If you're rude, disrespectful, etc., that can be a much bigger problem. You might mess up the whole deal, but I would say even if you don't, you will enter the organization as someone with a reputation for being rude and disrespectful, and that's not who you want to be.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, Holly, I have a question for you. So, how do I know when a salary/benefits is negotiable or not for an entry-level position?
Yeah, and Dean Hunter alluded to this earlier, reach out to your Cougs network. I think that's probably a big piece. But so I have a unique process or unique role in the candidate experience. So, and most recruiters have the role that I have. So for those that are familiar with sales titles, I'm the gatekeeper per se for candidates to go to my hiring teams to then they will be doing all the interviews. But also I get to navigate the candidate through the process and be on the outside of the interviews. So I can really build close relationships with my candidates to help answer some of these questions that maybe they don't feel comfortable asking a hiring manager. So I would say go to maybe the recruiter that you're working with the company, maybe someone that you have been working with along the way, and be transparent. You never know an answer to a question unless you ask. So, and I would say ask early. We have a question in the first interview when you're in the process for Cintas that says, what are your salary expectations? And we want to know. That way we can assess early on, hey, is this something that's going to make sense for you? And then we tell you what the flat rate is and what the rate is of this position. And if it doesn't make sense for you at that first interview, then we can, assess if it's the right fit for you moving forward. But I would say, again, be transparent and open and communicate with maybe the person that you are working closely with throughout the interview process. And then if they're not able to share those answers with you, there's a website called Glassdoor that is very, very real. I look at it all the time from an employer perspective. I look at Cintas, and it gives you a really good range. And keep in mind, too, that is a range. So maybe it's 50,000 in Midland, Texas, or Dallas, Texas, which is a little less expensive to live in than maybe the Seattle market. So that may be the range, or that may be the starting range for a position. But I definitely use your resources from the Cougs network, from Glassdoor, and then the person that you are building the relationship with throughout the interview process.
So I completely agree. I use Glassdoor all the time. Oh, excuse me. I just choked on my water right here. But now I have a question for you, Tom. And the question is a two-part question. It's how does one determine how much they're worth? And what if I think I'm worth a lot more than what they're offering me?
So there's this, you can try, a lot of people can try and answer what they're worth in terms of what they need. But probably what's going to be more persuasive is what your worth is. And this may objectify people a bit much, is what does the market say you're worth? What does the market say that your skills are worth? And, you want to do as much research on that as you can to find out what the market says you're worth. It's also kind of like when people, same problem when people try and sell houses. Their house may have a lot of sentimental value and they think it's worth a certain amount, but it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So typically, what is somebody willing to pay for you? Your best prediction of that is what is the market value for your skill set? Now, there may be other things that you value as well. Again, it isn't just about money that you're negotiating for. You may be looking for a job that has benefits, so the benefits themselves may be hard to negotiate. But if you're considering multiple offers, they may have very different benefits packages. There may be, this type of responsibilities that you're going to be given. How interesting is the work to do? What are you going to learn on the job? There's all kinds of things that you really want to think about, that what it is that you want out of the job as you launch into your career or the next phase of your career. So think about, what it is really that you're looking for from your perspective, what you're trying to achieve. But then secondly, as Chip would say, you always want to think about it from their perspective as well. We talked about that in terms of walkaway values. What's their walkaway value? At what point would they walk away? You also want to think about it from their perspective, which is going to be that you're not the only person out there probably, and there is probably some sort of market rate for your skills. So is that the first part of the question, Para, or did I get the whole thing? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, that was pretty much the first part. Just to clarify the second part, it was just like, what if I think I'm worth more than what I'm offering? And I think that goes with understanding where the market value is and what your talents are. Like you might have so much potential, but use that potential to, I guess, build your resume and like create more opportunities for yourself, so that is more apparent in a more of a tangible way to kind of gauge that. So I think you hit it on the nail. And with that, like, I just want to thank you guys so much, and I want to open up questions and answers now to the audience. So if the audience has any questions, please unmute yourself and ask directly, or if you feel more comfortable typing it in the chat box, I can read it out loud to our panelists.
I just had a quick question for Dr. Hunter. I know he said earlier, like when you don't lowball yourself, don't give an offer that is too low. Like if you, or like don't give them 40,000 if you think you're worth 50. But
Right.
what do you do if you answer like too high? Could you end up making it a bigger issue for yourself if they say, what do you think you're the lowest to work here? And you say like 80,000 when you're really not worth 80,000 yet. So I just want to know your opinion on that.
Yeah, this is where doing your homework really becomes important. There is, Tom and I can like give away the whole negotiation class here, and you won't have to take it after an hour and a half with us tonight. But there's one of the arts of negotiation is we like these anchors. So how do I open with what's called, and I love this, it's the MPP, which is the maximum plausible position. But I would say plausible is really important. And that's where the homework comes in. You don't want to ask for something that's implausible, because the person may decide you are implausible and not return your call. So I think that the homework really becomes critical about plausible. And the less you know, the more I think emphasis you want to put on plausible and less on maximum. The more you're able to gather information about what they've done in the past, what their alternatives are, the more you can kind of push that envelope. I do think typically new negotiators will be all over the place on this one. Some people get themselves all excited to negotiate and open implausibly, but many others, especially people who don't like to negotiate, will indeed sell themselves short. And so I think it's quite important for you to do enough analysis that you don't. And this is where practicing really helps. So taking a class from Tom or whoever's teaching it in Pullman, if you're a Pullman student or whatever, it actually matters. And then I want to actually, because we have an audience that's diverse, both men and women here, I want to make another note on this. Which is, and this is one of those things that's important to know this and then to register, hey, life isn't fair, and it's not. There's a lot of research on this. It turns out that the research suggests that a couple of levels here, there are differences in how women and men are perceived as negotiators. And so the first round of research discovered that women actually typically opened with less aggressive positions. They weren't as ambitious in their offers, and their deals weren't as good. It's like, oh, great. Well, we know what to say. Come on, women, step up, really put it out there and ask for more. Well, it turned out when they did that, they messed up more deals than men did. Why? Because society doesn't expect women to negotiate ambitiously. This is where the life isn't fair part comes in. Fortunately, there is an answer to that too. The unfortunate part is we still see from the research there's an extra burden on women in approaching Evan's question. And the extra burden is you have to do more homework, more work to be plausible. But as long as you put reasons out there for your ambitious offer, you won't get that negative backlash. You just have to do more homework to put out the reasons. So full circle back around to Evan's question, is there a risk in overshooting? Without reasons, definitely. Without homework, definitely. But with good reference points and good homework, it's less risky than most people think.
I have a question for Holly.
Hi there.
So Holly, how do you determine what is most important in a negotiation with companies? How do you find out whether they don't want to budget on salary, or if they don't want to budget on the signing bonus or vacation time? What questions do you ask to determine that?
Yeah, and again, I think that it's like I don't know if it was back in the day, people said, let's keep everything away from the interview process and be as not as transparent as we can be. And obviously there's some things that you don't share and we're legally not able to talk about, but also when it comes to your paycheck and how you get paid every week and your benefits and your paid time off, like that's extremely important. I would say the open communication in the interview process, when especially, and I for one, I like to talk about it early on. I recently went through an interview process for a promotion here at Centos, and we have to apply for all of our promotions. So we go through the same process as any other candidate. And at the very beginning, I said, hey, this is the value that I think I can bring to the table. And this is the salary that it's going to take for me to accept this position. Is this something that is realistic for us as we navigate through the process? I don't want to waste their time and I don't want to waste my time. So I would say early on, talking about, hey, I am 100% interested in this opportunity. I want to see, what do you think is a fair assessment of what I'm going to be paid if I do accept this offer, and what kind of paid time off do I get? There's no reason in asking what the benefits are like for an opportunity that you're about to embark on. And, shame on us at Cintas. We don't typically share a lot of the benefit offerings until you get an offer with us. But I had a discussion with my boss, our chief diversity officer and VP of HR. And I told him that we need to start having those conversations early on in the process, because we were losing candidates to other companies because we weren't sharing all of the long-term benefits of being a partner at Cintas, the stock options, the 401k, the profit sharing, all of those things that are extremely beneficial to all of you. And so I would say, and is it Daniel?
Yeah, that's the way to say my name.
Yeah, I would say definitely asking early in the interview process. And also, we have a really close relationship with the Career Center and a lot of your professors. And so they probably know a lot of our stories and what we can and cannot offer. So reach out to your resources on campus too that know a lot about the organizations that you're interviewing with. They could probably provide you with some great insight too there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would barge in and say, we talked about using the Cougar network, but gee whiz, I'm looking right here at Sophia and Ashley and Leanne, and use our career team as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those three are wonderful sources for some of the kinds of homework that you'll need to do. A very important resource for Carson Cougs looking for jobs.
So I had a question. Is there a way to, how do you know where the limit is from where you become almost cocky and arrogant versus confident? Is there a way to approach the situation that makes it easier? I guess this is for anybody, but is there a way to approach it so you sound more confident and not as arrogant or cocky? And so, I don't know, does that help more so?
I'll take a crack at it. Holly, go first.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll be really short and sweet. Being authentic, genuine, thanking the employer for the offer. And I hate the phrase, I deserve the XYZ. So eliminating that from when you're asking for an offer, because, do you really deserve, and I'm not going to go into more detail about that statement, but eliminating that and really truly practice your pitch, practice your negotiation, and then being authentic and thanking the employer for their offer. I think that goes a long way. And then again, making sure is it realistic for you to negotiate this offer and at the level that you're trying to negotiate. I've gotten turned off real quick by candidates who think they are worth a whole lot more than really their experience warrants. So I think that's a really great question, but I think being authentic, thanking them for the opportunity, and then going into the negotiation without saying that you deserve more than all the other 400 candidates that I extend the same offer to that accept the offer. I think that's a big piece for me. So I hope that helped.
And that's great. And Zachary, I would add to what Holly said, or maybe summarize what she said this way. Being confident is knowing what you're worth. Being arrogant and cocky is thinking you're more than you're worth. So one of the things that helps with confidence just in general negotiations is doing your homework, knowing that you've prepared as much as you can. You may not anticipate everything, that's okay. But as long as you've done your homework and you've thought about how you're going to approach this, you'll be amazed how much confidence that builds in you.
And I actually want to call back to something Holly said earlier, Zach. Listen, ask questions and listen to the answers. Anybody who be authentic, ask genuine questions, engage with the person across from you, and listen to the answers. That is a hard thing for us to do when we're accustomed to flying our flag. But the more that you can do, the less of that, kind of cocky vibe you'll give off, and you'll get a whole bunch of good information you can use in the negotiation.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm so sorry. I was just gonna say thank you to everybody for that.
It's a great question.
so we actually have two questions that came in. First one is from Richard Corson, and it says, is there a different technique to negotiate an hourly position versus a salaried position? And anyone can answer that.
Richard, I think the principles are pretty much the same. Some of the catches may be that the hourly jobs may be a little bit more codified. And so then the trick is to figure out the code and make sure that you can show the people who are hiring you why you fit into the slot that you are looking for. Salary, just on average, tends to be a little more flexible. So if you can kind of crack the code, again, you get some information. If you're looking at hourly, you can get some information about who's making 30 an hour and who's making 23 and who's making 16 and what the differences are between them, and figure out what makes you a $30 an hour employee versus a 16. That's probably a little more common in the hourly, but otherwise I think the principles are pretty similar, actually.
And we have another question. It's from Caitlin Hall. It says, coming out of college without experience, can we really negotiate, or will it just get shut down and lose the position?
Let me start. The first thing is always remember what the difference is between negotiating and begging, right? Begging, you have nothing to offer. If you're negotiating, you have something to offer. You know it, they know it. The other thing I think to consider in that situation is you have to remember that the point at which you get the job offer, you've already made it through the interview gauntlet. They like you. They want to hire you. That's why they're making you a job offer, because you have the skills that they need to do whatever they need to get done. The other part of that you want to remember, and it comes back to what Chip was talking about earlier, is kind of like, well, if you don't reach a deal, then what are they going to do next? What's their kind of best alternative to dealing with you? And what you can be sure of, unless, it's like the big accounting firms and it's really sort of a commodity type position, but that they're next, the person they're going to go to next, if you say no, they don't think is as good as you are. You know how you know that? Because if they did think that person was as good or better than you are, they'd be talking to that person and not you. So I think you always want to kind of keep that in mind. That gives you, a little bit of room for negotiating, even if you feel like, you just don't have the experience. Well, clearly you've got something they like, or they wouldn't have made you the offer.
So we're getting up to our 4-minute mark left for questions, but we have two more. And we have one from Marilena, which says, what are your recommendations for negotiating a salary within the same company? If you were changing departments or groups, for example, or your role is expanding, what is the best way to approach your manager?
I can jump in on this. I actually recently experienced this. I would definitely first and really go back to even the first piece of advice I gave. It is negotiating, is asking for more, is your experience, is your work worthy of that? So one, are you hitting all the what we call key performance indicators? So are you making sure that you're performing at a level that is worthy of a raise, additional money when going into a different position, a different department. And then I would say, again, being genuine and authentic on this is what I've been doing for the organization that warrants this negotiation of any sort of raise in different departments. I think that served me really well when I went in for not necessarily negotiating the offer. It was something that I provided them right up front of, hey, this is all that I've been doing in my former roles. Now, this is why when I step into this new position, I feel that I would definitely need this X, Y, and Z in order to take on these new responsibilities. So definitely, and I feel like all of us keep saying the same thing, and you're probably getting frustrated by how much research do I really need to do? But y'all, it is extremely important when you are prepared. Again, you're more confident, but then also you come to the table with a lot of things that really it's hard to say no to. And then I think that the next part was, what is the best way to approach your manager? We have a really open door policy at Cintas. And so we have every 6 months, we have debriefs. We have every 6 month performance reviews. We have debriefs often with our leadership team. But I would say if you have a set time that you're evaluating your performance, that's always a great time to really, one, you have a kind of a set layout of what you're going to be discussing to then talk about those maybe increases in your base salary. But then also incorporating that into your weekly discussions, your weekly debriefs with your leadership team. If you're not having conversations with your leaders on next steps in your career, make sure that that's added to your to-do list, because I think that's extremely important in ensuring that when you're having these negotiation conversations or these salary increases, it's going to be a whole lot easier.
And
So, I'm sorry. For the sake of time, I do want us to get to Evan's question before we wrap things up a little bit. So Evan had a question where he said, when do you know it is time to negotiate a raise? Is there a certain timetable one should follow, or is it an individual thing?
So that's awesome. I'm going to jump in because it actually augments the thing I wanted to follow Holly's ideas with. I think Holly was spot on. And sometimes you'll be in an organization that's not quite as organized with respect to their reviews, or they're quite organized but won't answer the key question. And I think one thing you can do is literally ask the question. And you can even ask it less personally to yourself. So the question would be, if it's personal, what would I need to do in order to merit a raise around here? Or what would someone need to do in order to merit a raise around here? And sometimes the answer will be, well, you need to be here for 18 months before you can really start talking about it. Then do your homework, find out if that's really true or they're just stalling you. But I think gentle questioning, especially in places that don't have much structure around, well, what really are the rules? I find that it's pretty hard for any boss who has any interest in you at all to not answer that question. So that question, I think, is quite a helpful place to start. And different organizations have different norms to Evan's question. So it's hard to answer just generally. There's a 12-month rule of thumb or 24 months. Some organizations have, by the book, every 18 months, you should be looking to move up and move over and move on. And other organizations are very loose. And if you're happy and they're happy, you just kind of stay there. So you would need to start asking the question, how do I move ahead here? So you need to learn the different organizations. And the one that you're in is the one that's relevant at the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dean Hunter. With that, I have one final question for all of you. And that is, if you could give one tip for successful If you could give one tip for successful negotiation, what would that be? Thank you so much.
Ask. Go ahead and ask. The worst they can do is say no. If you ask politely, the worst they can do is say no. And a lot of people just aren't willing to ask. I think that's one of the places to start.
Yeah, and actually, Dr. Tripp, that was exactly what I was going to say, and I was going to even type it in the chat box once Dean Hunter mentioned that. But I would also say, and this is one of my favorite quotes, that nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. And I say that in really, when you are asking for when you're negotiating, when you're just doing anything, if you're not excited, if you're not you know what you're talking about and confident, then probably will not go your way. But as an employer, I love to see when candidates are excited about my offer, when they're excited to join my team. I'm a lot less willing to work with them in certain situations. So when I know that, man, this is going to be a great partner to join the unique culture that we have at Cintas, what can we do? And then I'll go vouch to my VP for that particular candidate. So come with energy and enthusiasm and excitement to step into a new chapter of your story that's going to be real fun. You won't get a lot of, a 35-day holiday vacation or summer vacation anymore, but I promise you weekly paychecks are so worth it. So that would probably be my favorite quote and one of my last pieces of advice for everyone.
And I'll follow both those, but I just want to keep calling back to what Holly said. I think listening is really important in negotiation. So as Tom said, when you ask, you won't get something without asking. Typically, every once in a while, something will drop on you, but asking is critical. But then listening to the answer. Often, even when someone says no, their no contains information. As they start to explain why they're not going to do the thing you want, they're going to start to tell you why. And then you think, oh, well, I could address that. Maybe not today, but in 6 months, I could come right back. And when they say, well, you say, well, I did exactly the thing you said would get me this. So now what happens? So listening and gathering information, by paying attention is really critical in negotiation. I think, as Holly said, as we learn in negotiation, that we don't have to fill dead air with talking, but we can calmly, we can still be enthusiastic, but we can calmly sit and let the other person share and let the other person talk, be enthusiastic about what they're saying while we're gathering information. There's a lot of power in that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. With that, this will conclude our session. As a reminder to our WCU students, please see the chat for our event survey. Please take it. We ask all attendees to please complete the survey before logging off and click the link that has just been sent by Ashley in the chat box. And I'm going to pass it on to Amy, who will just share a few upcoming events that will be happening soon.
Thank you, Perry. And I just want to say thank you, Tom and Chip and Holly, for sharing your knowledge with us this evening. Just want to let all attendees know again, take that survey, please see it at the link, and it takes about a minute or so, and just fill that out for us, please. Upcoming events tomorrow at noontime, we have Career Insights Optimizing Handshake, LinkedIn, and AirMeet. So if you have not signed up, you can use this QR code to do so. There's also a link in the chat if you wish to tab that link before you leave. There's several events coming up. T-Mobile will be doing Q&A on Monday. Resume Refresh, where we will have some Cintas representatives that will be reviewing resumes. So join for that to get direct feedback before our big career event. We have an event with Slalom following that Tuesday evening. And then, career, that was a little fast there. My little mouse clicked before I was ready. And then we have our career networking panel, which we will also have another member of Cintas. Ellie will be there. So good Cintas connections all week long. And of course, we conclude with career networking night. You can use the QR code or use the link in the chat as well to register. There you will also be meeting with Cintas representatives and 31 other employers. So with that, also, just as Chip mentioned, connecting with the career team here at the Carson Center, we are here to help you get ready for all of these questions for your resume, for your LinkedIn, for negotiations. So just make sure that you make an appointment with us on Handshake. And with that, thank you for attending the Carson Career Spring Series, and thank you everyone for attending our very first one.